Welcome to the Live Love Ministries podcast, a place where we share thoughts, insights, and experiences from the mission field. I'm Eric.
I'm Brittany.
And I'm Julia.
And we're the Live Love Ministries team.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Live Love Ministries podcast. We pray that it has been an encouragement to you. We pray that you have enjoyed listening to the content as much as we have enjoyed sharing it with you. Today we are bringing you a special two-part episode that is discussing and dealing with something that is very important to us as a family, Brittany and I's family, that is very important to the life of our ministry and our entire ministry team, and that we pray is an important part of your life as well. And if it isn't, we pray that after listening, it will become an important part of your life. Like I said, it's a special two-part episode, both about 45 minutes long. And so the content was so good that we didn't want to lose any of it. The conversation is so important that we didn't want to cut any of it off. Instead of trying to condense it into one episode, we just made it into a two-parter. And so this is going to be part one of the story of refugees. We have a conversation with two of our daughters, Victoria and Shakina, about what it means to be a refugee, what refugee life is like. And eventually we get around to talking about what should the church's response be to the refugee crisis. And so in episode 1, you're going to hear stories from the refugee camp. Some of those are a little bit difficult to listen to. We kept them pretty well G-rated, but we talk about some of the difficulties of life from a refugee camp, what a refugee camp is, some of the difficulties that people have there. We also discuss what led to the refugee crisis. We talk about a civil war in Congo and some things that led to the refugee crisis for many Congolese refugees. And so that's kind of the first episode, just what led to the refugee crisis, what it's like living in a refugee camp, what it's like for the people who are still there, what kind of hope do they have as they live their life inside the refugee camp after they have fled their own country. And so that'll be episode 1. And then episode 2 will kind of transition into new life, like after refugees resettle into the country that they land in, what is their new life like? What are some difficulties that they face? And ultimately the second podcast episode will finish with what is the church's response, or what should the church's response be to the refugee crisis, and how do we best as Christians minister and serve refugees in our local communities. And we even hit on the Great Commission and how refugees are coming to our country, and it allows us better to fulfill the Great Commission that God has given us. So we hope that you enjoy listening in. We hope that it is encouragement to you. We hope that it is challenging to you, and we hope that it's new information for you. And if it is new information, we hope that it changes you as you listen. If it's old information and you are already involved in refugees, we pray that it just encourages you to continue moving forward in your fight for those who are struggling, in your fight to share Jesus with those who have no home and are maybe on the fringes of society. And so having said that, I don't want to take too much time before we get into the episode, but I do want to give a disclaimer. We do share some things, again, like I said, that maybe you might not want necessarily a small child to hear, but they're not too bad. It's not like we go into graphic detail, but we do mention a couple of things that if a child heard, they might ask about them. And so you might want to listen to that part yourself first. And that's just in the beginning when we begin to talk about the camp. After that point, we don't mention anything else that's too difficult. Also, we recorded this episode during the middle of the day when all of our kids were at home, and it was a little bit wild, and we are sitting around an uncontrolled environment. We had to have a little bit different equipment and a little bit different setup in order to get this podcast episode. And so if the sound quality isn't quite as good, or you hear kids laughing or a door slamming in the background, just forgive us for that. But we wanted to share this amazing content with you. Hope that you love it. Hope that it blesses you. Hope that it encourages you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Live Love Ministries podcast. We are joined today with two guests that we'll introduce in just a little bit. Eric is here with me. Julia's not here today, but today we're going to be talking about a new topic that we haven't addressed yet. And so far, we've been talking about most of the work that we do on the reservations. And today, we're going to talk about some of the other things that we do, specifically in the city of Phoenix, and even talk about some different countries. So, Eric, you want to talk to everyone about just this new topic that we're introducing today?
Sure. Welcome back. It is good to have everybody. We hope you're enjoying the podcast every week. It's given us an opportunity to share some of our heart for ministry, our heart for people, and our heart for what we do. And so we hope it's encouraging to you and your church, whatever context you serve in. But as Brittany said, today we're going to talk about something a little bit different. It isn't native work. If you are new to us or our ministry, we also spend a portion of our time working with refugees who have been resettled primarily in the Phoenix area, but Phoenix and Tucson both resettle refugees. And we're going to talk about what that looks like, what that means, why that's important to us, and why that should be important to all of us, the church, as followers of Jesus, why the refugee crisis in the world should be important to us. And so I want to introduce our guests. Our guests aren't really guests to us. They're part of our family. A long time ago, when our family started to grow through different ways, we tried to explain our family to people. And we would be like, this person is this person is that. But we've reached the point where we don't really try to explain our family much anymore. And so I won't try to do too much of that today. But we have our special guests, Victoria and Shekinah, with us. They are our daughters and have been a part of our life for many years. It has been such a blessing to have them in our life and to know them. And if you know them, if you're familiar with our family, you know that they are a blessing to you as well. But they came to us as a part of our life as refugees. We met them when they first came here and resettled in the United States, originally from the Democratic Republic of Congo, via Malawi. They spent some time at a refugee camp in Malawi, and they came into our life and have been a part of our family ever since. We have met hundreds, if not thousands, of refugees over the course of the last several years who have resettled in Phoenix, and not all of them have become family. Obviously, all of them are important and special to us, but Vicky, Shekinah, and their family have become our family. And so it's a really neat thing. It's really neat to see the way that God does that, orchestrates that. But I just want to explain a little bit about refugees. Maybe you're sitting there thinking, I don't know anything that what he's talking about. I'm not sure what he means by refugees, because usually when that word is brought up, people immediately have opinions or thoughts or a picture in their mind of what refugee life is. And for the vast majority of people, it isn't what you think it is. Refugees aren't people who come here necessarily out of choice. A refugee is someone who has been persecuted or someone who has been forced to flee their home country and cannot return home. And so, for example, Vicky and Shekinah are from Congo. Some of our other children are from Congo. If you know much about history, the Democratic Republic of Congo has been in civil war for the better part of 3 decades. It's been a long time, and some say even before that. At the height of the country in the 1960s, there were a lot of different things going on, but shortly thereafter, Congo gained its independence, and then through some corruption, through government, things like that, mineral rights that were fought over, the country began to go into a civil war. Some rebel groups came across the border from Rwanda, and then war kind of spread. And at one point, I don't know how many are there now, but at one point there were 27 rebel army groups just in the eastern part of Congo alone. And so it created a civil war and a refugee crisis that many had never seen before, that had never been seen before, and many people fled. And so refugees are in situations where they can't just go home. They can't just turn back and pretend like nothing ever happened. And so for the most part, they are what you consider to be a victim of injustice. Things are going on. They are forced to flee out of fear for their life, which is different than an immigrant. An immigrant chooses to leave their homeland to come to a different one, where a refugee is forced to leave. Okay, so when a refugee leaves their country, and they're fleeing for their life and their safety, they go to another country oftentimes that has what's called a refugee camp. Refugee camps are in different countries throughout the world, but especially in areas surrounding areas of crisis. But in sub-Saharan Africa, there are refugee camps in Malawi and I think Tanzania, right? In Uganda, a few places like that. There are refugee camps. And refugee camps are literally that. They're basically areas where refugees come from other countries. They come into this country, and a camp is set up by the UNHCR, which is the United Nations High Council of Refugees. They document the incoming refugees, and the refugees begin to live in that country, in that camp. Now, they aren't a citizen of that country. They really aren't a citizen much of any country. They just live there in the camp and survive and try to live. And many times people from multiple countries come to those camps and are trying to live this life together. And so it's a very, very difficult. And I'll talk about some stuff in the refugee camp later. But anyway, they live there in the refugee camp. There's UNHCR offices there in the camp. And then if they're fortunate enough, refugees and their families get the opportunity to file for relocation. And then even then, if they're more fortunate enough, they get resettled in one of many countries, the United States, Canada, Switzerland, Australia, different places like that. And so it's a long, strenuous process, stressful process. Life in the camp isn't easy. And so it isn't just, when you see refugees or you hear somebody's refugee, they don't just show up one day, now I'm going to live in America or now I'm going to live in Canada. They have been through years and years of persecution and hardship and difficulty to get to where they are. And there are people that are amazing, and many of them, if given the choice, they would love to go back to their home country and live life like it originally was, but they simply cannot. And so when you hear that Vicky and Shakina came into our life as refugees, they weren't coming just as they were on a vacation. They had come here from Congo to Malawi to here to the United States after years of difficult situations. So we brought up life in the camp, or we brought up the refugee camp, and you guys have lived there. And I don't know if people are drawing a visual in their mind of what the camp looked like, but why don't you guys, so that people can hear from you, hear from your heart, tell us a little bit about life in the camp. What's it like for a family when they first get there? And then what are the things kind of going through their mind, or what are some of your experiences about it? And then how do people kind of survive and make it in the camp? Who wants to go?
Okay, so when you first arrive in the camp, they put you in a huge room, and then you have to wait for a couple of days or weeks until they give you a land for you to build your own house. And unless if you went there and you already had family previously there, that means you can just go ahead and live together with them. And when we arrived, my mom was already there, so we didn't really have to start the whole process of being in that room and waiting for a land to be given. So we just went straight ahead and lived with my mom and my dad. So
yeah,
it was a pretty a little bit easier settling in the camp because we had relatives. If you don't have relatives, it's really a little bit harder to settle.
Okay. So you leave a country. So say someone is in Congo and their life is in danger and they flee and they make it to Malawi. So you're saying the first place they go is in a big room, basically. Mm-hmm. Who do they check in with? They go into the officials when they first get there? They just walk up to the camp? How do most people get there? They just walk up?
Well, some they just walk up and go to there's offices in the camp for the UN, and you go to the office and tell them that you just arrived, and then they'll take you to that big room. And if you have families there, then you can just walk in and go straight to your family.
Okay.
And then the next day you can just walk up to the office and tell them I'm new in the camp and start the process.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was in the camp, you guys' camp, a couple years back. I got the privilege to go there, and I say a privilege because it changed me. When I went to the camp, I thought I had an idea of what refugees kind of had, because I'd been around a lot of refugees on the United States side, and I've been a lot of refugees, in their homes and stuff. And I thought I had a pretty good idea, kind of where refugees were coming from. And I'd been to Congo multiple times, and so I went to Malawi to the refugee camp. You guys know this, and it was life-changing for me. That room you're talking about, like if you just say it as a room, like people hearing it might go, oh, they go in a room. But we're talking like, in what I saw was more like one big concrete floor, concrete walls, like it's not like you're coming into a room in someone's house. It was like just a block building. And the way it was set up when I was there, and I know this is years after you guys were there, it was almost set up like horse stalls, like you would see in a barn. There was like a little square and another little square and another little square in this room, divided by almost like mosquito nets on the front and the sides. And so a family, that day I was there, a family of 12 had arrived, and they pushed them in this little bitty, I don't mean forced, they put them in this little bitty square. And so they had come from the country, had made their way all the way there, come in, they're finally there, and they're stuck in this little bitty square inside this room. So it's inside a room, inside a stall in the room. And so just seeing how scared they were and terrified they were, because they didn't have family in the camp, they didn't know anybody there. They had gotten there that day, and just to see the fear in their eyes of, okay, we've made it to a safe place, but we don't know anything. We don't know what to expect, and they were stuck in this little hole. And their food was given to them, kind of like rations at the beginning, given to them, and then a bag of charcoal was given to them and said, here, now you have to figure that out. And I spent some time talking with them and hearing their heart through a translator, and it was really life-changing for me. I remember meeting one person in that room, and I don't want to talk too much about this because I want you guys to give your thoughts, but the first day that I was there in the camp, I met this lady who was albino. And if you're listening and you don't know what albino is, it's somebody who is genetically black, but they have the pigment doesn't develop in their skin, and so they have basically they're white skinned. I met this lady who was albino the first day I was there in that room. She had just arrived to the refugee camp, and when I met her, she had cuts all over her face, and her eye, one of her eyes wasn't working. You could tell it had been damaged. It was kind of glazed over, and she was just in really bad shape, and she had just gotten there a few hours before, and we asked her, what happened to her. And many places in Africa still practice witchcraft, and some people that were practicing witchcraft or wanted to practice witchcraft saw her. And in witchcraft, people who are albino, their bones are very valuable, and their body parts are very valuable, and all that stuff. And so she got attacked by people who wanted her body parts. And so they physically tried to force her eyes out, like they tried to cut out her eyes. That's why her eye was glazed over. They were trying to cut off her ears. That's why she had scars and cut. Fortunately, another group of refugees saw them attack her, and they defended her, and she was able to get away. So not only did she flee her country, not only was she ending up in this room with people that she didn't know, but she had been attacked multiple times on the way just because of the way that she looked. And so that was a really intense time for me. Yeah, it was really overwhelming. When she's telling her story, I'm like, man, I got nothing, and somebody said, why don't you say something to encourage them, and as a pastor or minister, you're supposed to have these words to encourage people. And we did. We prayed with her. We said some things that we felt like would give her some encouragement. But you're overwhelmed, it's an overwhelming experience to be in that refugee camp.
It is, because when we were in there too, you hear stories about albinos that were staying in the camp, and you hear some people went to attack them at night just because they want their body parts and stuff like that, because they practice witchcrafts. So it was a little bit easier for them, because as soon as the UN hears about that, they know that your life is in danger. So they had to get them out of the refugee camp as quick as possible as they can. Yeah, so those stories, we did hear them. It's pretty scary.
Yeah.
It is.
And so speaking of and Congo is just one country, right, that refugees come from. There are refugees in Southeast Asia, multiple countries in Southeast Asia, multiple countries in Africa, in the Middle East have refugees. But because that's where you're from, and that's what we know the most about, let's talk a little bit about what people have gone through before they get there too, kind of just to help frame our mind around that. So since the civil war in Congo has started, there's been 8 million deaths I want you to think about that. That's a lot, over 8 million deaths since the war has started. That has led to unbelievable amounts of traumatic experiences that people have gone through before they ever get to a camp, right? Before they ever get out of the country. Many. Every refugee I met in the camp had seen someone else murdered, had seen someone else die, and many of them had seen someone else raped, or if they were young women, had been raped themselves. Because rape has been used as a weapon of war since the war began. Some of the young boys that I met had been child soldiers. They had been kidnapped by the rebel groups and forced to be child soldiers. And then in Congo alone, there is an orphan crisis. And so the war has created an orphan crisis where moms and dads get killed. And so just in Congo alone, there are 5 million orphans. I want you to think about the number 5. Just in one country, there's like 147 million orphans in the world, roughly 145 to 150 million orphans in the world, and 5 million of them come from one country alone, from Congo. And so people aren't just walking up to the camp. When we say camp, in America, a lot of people think they're going camping, like they're going with a group to go camping, and they've got their tents and their fishing poles, and these people are coming to save their own life. They're coming to save their family. They're coming from war, and they're coming from difficult situations. And so when refugees come to the camp, they're coming with some baggage. Would you agree to that?
Yes,
yeah,
definitely, yeah.
And just because a family does get fortunate enough to get resettled in the United States, that doesn't mean that baggage all stays, right, in Africa, because they have had some difficult stuff happen in their life.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about arriving at the camp, and then, talking about where you're going to live. If you have family, then you can go ahead and live with them, or if you don't, then they'll assign you a place that you'll get to stay. But then after that comes the real life of now you're there, now you're going to be there for a while for sure. So what is life like at the camp, like day-to-day life? Like, do people work? How do you get your food? Do you go to school? Like, kind of the whole thing. What happens?
Well, when I got at the camp, I had come from a different country, and life there was just like America. And so I got to the camp, and everything was different. And I would probably say the first few years were kind of fun for me. I saw chicken running around, sheep, and I was just running after them. I saw how people were getting their water. We have water pumps. So we have like buckets and gallons that we have. Like if you need water, people have to go to the water pump, and they would have like 3 gallon bottles, what do you call this, and some buckets, and then they would fetch water and put it in their house. So that's the same water they would use to cook, to take showers, because we didn't have like a bath or running water for showering. So you would have to pump and then carry it all the way to your house, and then place it in your house. There were certain areas that had electricity, and some areas didn't have electricity. So if you didn't have electricity, you would have to buy candles or use lamps that use,
kerosene?
Kerosene?
Yeah. So that's that. And people didn't work.
They did or did not?
They did not work. Some people owned stores, but those were people that have already relatives here abroad who sends them money, and so they can start up a business.
You wouldn't really say a store. You'd probably say maybe like a really small boutique, just for you to get income to buy food. So they'll probably be selling like candles, drinks,
and like
matches
out of their house,
not
in like a business store building. Yeah.
Sometimes it's like your house, and then just like a window from your house.
Gotcha.
Like you just like open up a window and just like sell small things.
And even some sell like kids' toys, right? Like I saw some people selling soccer balls and stuff like that.
Yeah, handmade stuff, just so that you can get the income to buy things. Just like she said that, you didn't have electricity. It's like, when you go camping, you're just there for like few days, so it's fun.
Yeah.
But imagine living that kind of a life for 5, 10, 11 years, that is very, very hard.
Yeah.
So even when we talk about food, yes, the UN will give us food, but then it was like they'll only give you like beans, small amount of salt, a little bit of oil, and corn.
Okay.
And so you will have to find your own way how you're going to cook that stuff, because just like she said, some places have electricity and some places don't have electricity, and for the people that don't have electricity, they have to use charcoal.
Okay.
So you have to find money to buy charcoal, right? So it's really, really hard, very hard. So a lot of people have to farm vegetables, like plant vegetables, and sell them so they can get money to buy, other stuff for food that they need, or charcoal, or medications, or things like that.
Okay.
It's really
a huge
hard.
population depended on farming. Like I think almost every single family, like I would say like almost 60% had a farm, and then they would grow their own vegetables. Some also owned some livestock. So they had cattle, goat, cows, and then they'll let them breed. And some had chickens. We had a chicken, and we had let it breed. So that was fun. Like I said, like the first, it's just like when you go camping, everybody's excited. And everything was fine, and then I was like, oh, wait a minute, am I gonna be camping the whole rest of my life?
But you were like a child, right? Like
I was 14. I was 15, 14 between those ages. So
And let me just say something. It's also different for people that comes from like a really hard life. Okay, because we are from Congo, yes, but we didn't come straight from Congo to the camp. We came from like South Africa, and it's just like America. So you are just like used to having everything that you need. You have electricity, you have clothes, you have food, everything's available for you. And then to get out of that life into a refugee camp, where it's like you have nothing at all. But when you talk about Shekina, when she says it was fun for her because she grew up into a life where she had everything. She didn't see a live chicken, and she see it's on the TV. But then when we get to the camp, she sees chicken running around, goats, she's chasing them. Oh, I have never seen this before, and as time goes by, you're like, wait, is this really going to be my life? Like from having everything to having nothing at all, eating 3-4 times a day to eating like 2 times a day. So you just sit down and you think about that, like, is this really like what's going to be, and how many years is it going to be? Because you can't predict how long you're going to be in the camp. It's the UN that works all your papers, your processing and everything, and you just have to be patient and wait. So it's really, really hard.
And as you talk about the time that people spend in the camp, I think it should be like our listeners should understand that the average time that a refugee spends at a refugee camp is 17 years. That's average. And so you're talking, some people live their whole life. Maybe their paperwork, they just can't get it right. They can't prove their identity.
Definitely.
Something's wrong with them medically that they don't want to bring to another country. And so they spend the rest of their life inside the walls of that ever how many acre camp it is. And some of them are bigger than others, obviously, but the one in Malawi is big, and it's growing. Unfortunately it's growing.
It's very huge, because a real quick fact, when we first went in the camp, it was probably like 1999 to 2000 there, and we didn't stay in the camp for a long time, and at that time there was like really few people, and so we left the camp. I'll probably say like 2002, 2001. We went to South Africa. So we lived in South Africa for 10 years. And then when we went back to the camp, we found some people that we left back then, and they were there. And then even though when we left the camp and we came to the U.S., we still left them there. And we've been in the U.S. for 6 years. So you're probably talking about 16 years, and they've been there for a very long time. So it takes a lot.
So not having a shower, not having running water, not having electricity, not knowing where your food's going to come from. Like Shakina said, it sounds fun to a kid for a little bit, but when a family with mom, dad, children, or grandma with children because mom and dad have passed away, or children alone because they've lost their mom and dad on the way there, when this goes on for a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. I met somebody who'd been in the camp 30 years. You know, that's a long time.
Long time.
Some are born and raised there.
Get married there.
And get married and give birth to children. So like the only thing they know is just being there. And some people are like really scared to leave and like actually go to a different place, because all they ever know is being in that place, being given food, or the little the Red Cross or UNHCR provides for them. But people people are really scared to just leave and go about without any help.
Right. And I think something I've noticed, and see if you guys can speak to this too, is like, so we have our ministry, Live Love Ministries, we work with the refugees, but we also have a 501c3 in Phoenix called Ethne Global Services that helps refugees when they very first arrive. And so you guys have helped us do that, and you know that. And so one of the things I've noticed when working with the refugees when they first come to the United States, they have a hard time getting out of survival mode, because I think that's kind of what you're talking about. In the camp, everybody's I just got to survive. And so if it means Red Cross bringing me food, if it means and then they come to the United States, they have a hard time adjusting to, not that I'm okay now necessarily, but that I can kind of exhale a little bit and I can breathe and I can begin to plan the rest of my life rather than just survive day to day, because they survived just to get out of their country. They survived their time in the refugee camp. And so some refugees spend years, even in their resettlement country, trying to just go from survive to thrive, right? Survive to live. You have to tell some people it's okay. Nobody's coming to take you. Nobody's going to hurt you. Just relax, make plans, get your kids in school, and start moving forward. We know you didn't choose to be here, but you can make a life out of this, right? And so I think that's kind of what you're talking about. People have a hard time leaving because all they've ever known was just survive, and I'm surviving here. What happens if I leave and I can't? That kind of stuff.
So just kind of now thinking through that, your time at the camp, is while you were there, now that you're able to look back, are you overall, I'm not necessarily thankful for my experience of that I got to live in the camp, but I guess, do you see life differently because you lived in the camp?
Yeah, with me, I'll say I do see life differently. I think out of everything, you learn to appreciate what you have, whether it's small, whether it's big, and you learn to work for it, because in the refugee camp, they do give you some things, but it's not everything. And so you have to learn to work for almost everything that you want or you need. So that was a really good experience. I would say for me it was a good experience, but it's not a life that I would wish anybody to go through or to experience, because it's not easy at all.
It's quite life-changing too, living there, because I came from South Africa to Malawi. Life was so different, and then I came to America, and comparing them, maybe I wouldn't know the things I know now if I had not gone through that place. So it teaches you how to actually treat somebody, or how to talk to a person if you hear that they're refugees too, because you're oh my gosh, I've been a refugee too, and I know how it's been. I've been in a camp, and because so many people just hear the TV shows about how terrible Africa is, like how people are going through suffering. And although people in the camp were not living their best life and they were like in shortage of certain things, it doesn't mean that everybody was so stressed and was just living a sad life. There were actually some happy moments, some laughing moments. The only sad moments would always, when it comes to, it's a new day, what am I supposed to give my children to eat, how are they supposed to dress, and all that. But and we would go to school. I know you asked about school, sorry we didn't reply, but we actually do have school, and there's also the university too. Canada sponsors it. So although you have to have a certain amount of GPA, here in America you call it GPA, back there you call it points. You take a national exam your senior year. So once you graduate, you have to have a certain like, let me say maybe 4.0 and above GPA to apply to that university. And you have to go through multiple tests, interviews, and once you pass it, they'll actually like take you to Canada, and you go ahead and continue education there. Our high school is pretty small. We only had 8 classes in total, and I would say 9 because 8 classes in meaning each and every freshman class had 2. So a freshman class, we had 2 freshman classes, 2 sophomore, 2 junior, 2 senior classes, and then we had 1 ESL class. So if you didn't know English, they would put you so for you to learn English, and after that you can continue with school. Our primary school was from 1st grade to 8th grade, and 8th grade you would take a national exam too. For lunch, during lunch they used to give hand out porridge. We had a kitchen, they used to cook porridge, and it was not mandatory, you don't have to take it, but so many kids would eat it because you're not quite sure, if I don't eat this, I might not eat at all. So like most children, like always, you'd have to come with a cup from home to school to actually get the porridge.
Oh really? You have to bring your own cup.
Your own cup and your own spoon. And sometimes the porridge didn't have sugar, so you have to bring your own sugar. So it's like we'll provide like half of it, so you bring the other half, the other portion. But we also had sports. I played netball and soccer throughout and did track too throughout my primary and high school year. So yeah, they did a good job doing education, because if I have to compare education back there in the camp and here, because you feel like, it's the camp, so they don't really have great teachers. We actually had really, really great teachers, because when I came here, school, I was like, wait, I did this when I was in 8th grade and I'm a junior here. Why am I still doing this? So school is like way harder back there than it is here. So like if you actually go to school in camp, I feel like you would be like way smarter once you come here in America and study. And you hear people like, this is hard, and I'm like, I can help you. So it's something I did a while back.
That's cool. That's good. You mentioned something before you were talking about the school, was life wasn't always as bad in the camp. Like there were good days.
Yes.
And I was looking at my notes for our podcast today, and I was writing down things I remembered from the camp. And the very last thing I wrote was, I remember overwhelming hope that people had. Like I went to church service in the camp, and it wasn't like I was in a church service full of people who were in despair. I mean, they were physically in despair at times, but like spiritually and emotionally, they had hope, and they had a desire to better their life, and they worked hard at it, and people were happy, like and joyous. The country of Malawi is very friendly anyway. It's extremely one of the friendliest places I've ever been in the world, if not the friendliest. And that friendliness overflowed into the camp, and people were just happy, number one, to be alive, to be around their family, and those who are Christians were happy to worship God and to be together in that community of believers. it was like it gave them a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe they all came from different parts of wherever country they were from, because there were refugees from Congo, but there were also refugees from Ethiopia and Sudan, Somalia, Rwanda, Burundi, different places like that, and who are like, don't even really know each other at all, and then they come together, and there is hope there. And so
And I think what made gave people hope is because people are really nice to each other. Like, for example, we had several neighbors, and then there were times whereby we just cook a huge meal and we tell the neighbors, you guys don't have to cook today because we are cooking today. And the whole family, the husband, the wife, the children would just come, like we'll all share it together. So it's just become like the whole block where we lived, like four families around us, they just became like part of our family. And very helpful too.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on what Shekina said about people were really nice to each other. Like in the camp, like the camp is big, but I feel like everybody knew everybody. And everybody was concerned about their neighbors. Like, if I don't see them today, like, I go knock on their door, like, what happened? You know, I haven't seen you today. Or, like, we check up on each other. So there was just, like, so much love, you know. And if you have a lot of food, you share with your neighbors. And another thing that kept us going in the camp was church. Church was, like, number one, especially, like, with my mom. She was always telling us, God comes first. And I think it's something that most of the people in the camp, like, they put their hope into, which was God. God was number one. And so we really, like, showed love and affection to each other through church. And churches had a lot of activities. And so we'd go to overnights, we'll go to Bible studies, we'll go for choirs, we'll go for seminars, we'll have plays, we'll have parties, you know. It was really, really nice. Like, people were looking forward to going to church on Sundays, or going to teaching on Wednesdays and Fridays, or going for choir practice. So it was, when it comes to that part, I really did enjoy being in the camp, because people had so much faith. Like, you can even tell by them preaching or singing, or the way they act with their friends or their neighbors, which was really, really good.
Yeah, that's really cool. And even though you're here, the camp is still there to this day. And so that joy and that hope still remains in a lot of people. I have a lot of friends in the camp. I know you have a lot of friends in the camp and family in the camp. And they still have that hope and that excitement. One of the neatest things that I think we get to be a part of as a ministry too is sponsoring some of the work in the camp that the church does, helping them to put on evangelism and outreach programs. They use soccer and other sports, netball, as a way to reach people. Many Congolese people come knowing about Jesus, but a lot of the other countries that come to the camp, many of them don't. Like, many of them come, maybe they're Muslim, or maybe they have a different background, and so they're not exposed to the gospel, they're not exposed to Jesus before they get there. And so many of the Christians in the camp, many of the people at the church, are able to use everyday life stuff to reach people and to share that hope with them. And so ministry goes on in the camp too. It isn't just survive. There is ministry, and there's a sense of community there that maybe most people have never experienced. It's just a unique life. It's like a country inside a country, but people from a bunch of different countries. It is really neat. And when you're there, you're not, and me, I personally, I wasn't scared. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't like, what's going to happen? It was like, man, this is cool. You know, you're overwhelmed by some of the hard stuff you see, but at the same time, you're encouraged by the joy, especially the followers of Jesus, that they have. I mean, you think about this. So many times in America, when things go wrong in our life, like, everybody's like, well, why has God allowed this to happen? Or we maybe lose a job, or we lose this situation, or something terrible comes. Corona happens, you know, and we're just distraught, you know, because our everyday, normal, perfect life has been interrupted by an inconvenience. And so we lose faith, or we lose hope, or you see people abandon the faith over stuff like this. Then you kind of go to the camp, and you see people who have literally lost everything. They show up to the camp, maybe with the clothes on their back. You know, some of the guys show up, they don't even have a shirt on, you know, because they lost it on the way there. And so they literally show up with nothing and have hope. that many people wouldn't have in that same situation. So it is encouraging. You can get a lot of encouragement out of that. And so last couple of things about the camp, and then we'll transition to life in America for refugees, okay? Like I said, I know you have family in the camp. I know you have friends in the camp still to this day. I remember when I visited, I had people telling me, tell Vicky, tell Shakina that I said hi. Take a picture and show them, So I know you have friends there. I know that your Vicky, your husband, has family that are still refugees and then Mamu, your other sister, has in-laws that are in the camp as well, and so met some of them. If you had to send a message to them, like what do you want to say to them now that you're here on this side and you're thinking back? What do you say to them? And maybe I know you do talk to them. So what do you say to them to give them hope and encouragement as they're still living there and you're here?
Well,
all right, Shakina, you go first.
Well, because they always ask about how life is in America and everything, and they always think that life in America is super easy. Like we wake up and oh my gosh, it's $100 bill on my tree. Start picking up money. So they always think so, because when you like send them even $50, it's like a lot of money over there. So they always wonder, oh my gosh, if they can send me this amount of money, how much do they actually have, But it's just the currency differences. So I always tell them, like, when you get just hang in there, everything's gonna be fine. Life in America isn't easy and it's not hard at the same time. It's just like the camp. If you have a heart to work hard, you will actually survive. So if you guys can survive in the camp, whereby you literally have nothing, if you come here, you guys will make it. So all that you guys just have to wait for is for you guys to make it out. Once you make it out, everything is just gonna go easily, as long as you have like the dedication to work for it. Everything's not handed out to you, because I do know some refugees in Canada that want to be in America, but the only reason that's stopping them is because of how hard you have to work here in America, because everybody knows how Canada things are free, how the government gives them money, so that they're still stuck to that. Somebody has to give me this to provide for myself. So I'm like, if you come here and actually work for yourself, you'll be fine. My friend recently just came here last year, and I was talking to him. He's like, I want to go back. And I was like, you've been there all your life. That's literally what you know. And you've been here just for like 2 months or 3 months, and you really want to go back. So just wait and see how it goes. And I recently talked to him again. He's like, oh, you know what? It's actually not bad, Things is like easier when
so you can always encourage them to be strong and be patient and take your time and just pray about it and see where it goes. But yeah, it's hard, but you just have to encourage them.
All right,
give them heart.
That's good. Thank you guys for sharing that. On a side note to our listeners, our family is growing, and there are kids and grandkids and people everywhere. So if you hear background noises, this is life for us, okay? And so we're in a house full of children, and we are stuck in a room doing this podcast interview. And so just have some grace on us as we deal with it as well. Coronavirus keeps us all kind of locked up, and so everybody's going crazy. And so just be patient with us if you hear that background noise, or just let it bring a smile to your face, knowing that God puts families together. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please tune in next week as we continue with part 2 of this all-important conversation.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Live Love Ministries podcast.
We hope it was encouraging, made you think, and broadened your understanding of our mission and the mission of making disciples of all nations. You can find out more information about our ministry at www.liveloveministries.org.
If If God leads you to partner with us financially through prayer, or if you're interested in bringing a mission team to Arizona or one of our other locations, you can find that information on our website as well. Until next time, keep loving people and keep pointing people to Jesus, and we'll see you then.